much, Madam Chair and members of the committee. And I also want to take a moment to thank the committee for its very thorough review of this issue. And I'm most pleased to take the amendment suggested in the analysis.
Right.
So SB 637 seeks to address a recent court ruling which found that California's regulatory program of suction dredge mining violated the Federal Supremacy Clause in the 1872 Mining Act because the state's Department of Fish and Wildlife did not have the authority to fully mitigate all of the environmental impacts as directed by the legislature, and thus could not issue permits and lift the moratorium on suction dredge mining. Now, this bill empowers the State Water Resources Control Board to use its regulatory powers under the Federal Clean Water Act to address the water quality issues associated with suction dredge mining. This addresses both the gap in regulator activity and clearly ensures that California's regulatory program is in line with federal protections and the court's concerns. Now, we know that suction dredge mining can cause serious environmental impacts. According to a 2003 study by the Water Board, the power equipment used by suction dredgers to vacuum up river stream beds causes a plume of often mercury-laden sediment to travel downstream, which is harmful to water quality, public health, endangered species, and cultural sites. Now, folks on the committee who know much about this issue know that there was a lot of mercury that got into the rivers during the gold rush in the 19th century. And so we're still feeling the impact of this as a result of particular activities that happen in the rivers. Now, in a letter to the Department of Fish and Wildlife from 2013, the Water Board said that recreational suction dredging as a whole has a disproportionately greater effect on mercury resuspension, which is like agitation and redistribution of the mercury, when compared to other natural events or other types of human activity. And in 2011, the USGS, Geological Survey, reported that suction dredge miners mobilize and change toxic metals such as mercury that are currently buried under rocks and mud down in the rivers. This action makes mercury more available for transformation into toxic methyl mercury. Members of the Karuk tribe from the Klamath River region of the state sued the state in 2005 to restrict suction dredge mining activities in their region because of the impacts of this activity on green sturgeon and salmon, both of which are on the endangered species list. As a result, the Department of Fish and Wildlife was ordered to conduct an environmental review of the activity. And in 2009, the legislature temporarily banned suction dredge mining until that review was complete. And in 2011, it called on the department to require full mitigation of the environmental impacts before issuing a mining permit. So the department issued its final environmental impact report in 2012, but it recognized that despite the legislature's requirement, the department did not have the authority to regulate impacts to protect public health, water quality, or cultural sites, and thus could not issue permits that guaranteed these protections. They made the point at the time that other agencies, such as the State Water Resources Control Board, have jurisdiction over those types of impacts. Now, in January this year, the San Bernardino Superior Court ruled that federal mining law preempted the department's regulations of suction dredge mining on federal land since the department could not legally issue permits. The court commented that the state's laws related to suction dredge mining needed clarification. So by requiring the State Water Control Board to regulate the discharge of pollutants into waterways resulting from suction dredge mining as it regulates every other discharger under the Federal Clean Water Act, this bill, SB 637, addresses the court's ruling directly. It closes the gap in California's statutory framework regarding suction dredge mining by both giving the appropriate agency authority to deal with the water quality impacts and by ensuring that suction dredge mining activity conforms to both state and federal protections. In this era of acute drought, we need the Water Board there, ensuring that human activity doesn't adversely impact water quality. So I have here with me today Izzy Martin from the Sierra Fund, who's going to speak in support and assist in answering questions. And also here today is Craig Tucker, who's on the Tribal Council of the Karuk. Thank you so much.
Before we hear from your witnesses, I would like to again note that the Senate Environmental Quality Committee will be discussing and voting on issues relating to water quality, including mercury. We're here mostly on the impacts to fish and wildlife here today. And so that would really help. It's meant to help the testimony and what can be considered today, but we certainly would welcome any written information being given relating to mercury. Please give it to the Committee on Environmental Quality.
And with that in mind, Madam Chair, for folks in the audience to know, if this bill does pass out of committee, that Environmental Quality Committee hearing will be on the 29th.
29th. Thank you very much for clarifying that for people who would like to attend or send in letters prior to that. It's helpful if it's several days ahead of time, because then we can make sure that it's in members' packets and it can be analyzed as part of the record. So, Ms. Martin, welcome.
Thank you, Senator Pavley and members of the Natural Resources Committee. My name is Izzy Martin. I'm speaking here today for the Sierra Fund and also the Sierra Nevada Alliance, a 90-member organization that represents groups all over the Sierra Nevada. The Sierra Fund was invited to participate in the Public Advisory Committee put together by the Department of Fish and Wildlife a few years ago, and as part of that, we learned a lot about suction dredge mining. One thing we learned was when the suction dredge miners were sent out a survey to find out how many of these folks were out there. There's about 3,000 permits given out every year, most of them to Californians. We learned that of those 2,956 residents that year, about 3% of them reported that dredging income contributes more than 10% of their annual income. That's about 90 people. The Sierra Fund has been concerned about the impact of suction dredge mining for a variety of reasons. We will certainly have talked a lot about the water quality impacts, and hearing what you're saying, I'll talk about that in front of the Senate Environmental Quality Committee. But it's also important to realize that suction dredge mining has a very important impact on a number of endangered species, including and other wildlife, for example, passerines. It's great to see the amendment that's being considered today, which says that the Department of Fish and Wildlife should consider more than just fish. They should consider the entire part of their name, fish and wildlife. We have documented peer-reviewed science which shows the very dangerous impact of these machines on a variety of different sorts of animal species. Well, I think the only important thing we're trying to have this bill do is say, if you're a hobby miner, if you're doing this for fun, you should not be doing it to destroy our water, our environment, public health, endangered species. For the 90 people that are doing it professionally, they should obey the rules that all other professional miners in the state have to obey. They should get a water discharge permit if that's what they need. If they're moving more than 1,000 cubic feet of material, they should get a SMARA permit. If they're in an area where there's endangered species, they should get a take permit. This isn't saying that these miners should have to do anything that every other professional miner in the state doesn't have to do. I don't understand why there's a loophole to these regulations for a hobby, and I would ask that you pass this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. The next primary witness is?
My name is Craig Tucker, and I'm not on the council for the Karuk tribe. I've been working for the tribe for about 10 years on this issue, and I have to apologize. One of my council members was slated to come today and had a family emergency. The Karuk tribe is the third largest federally recognized tribe in the state of California with about 4,200 members. And many Karuk still reside in Aboriginal territory, which is about 1.4 million acres in what today is Siskiyou and Humboldt counties. And about 90 miles of the Klamath River and hundreds of miles of tributaries flow through Karuk territory. The tribe was federally recognized in 1979. However, tribal oral history as well as anthropological evidence suggests the Karuks were among the first Californians. And like many of California's native people, the Karuk has suffered innumerable injustices at the hands of gold miners, and to some degree, those injustices continue today. And despite the loads of gold that are hauled out of the Klamath Basin, about 90% of Karuks who live in Aboriginal territory live below the poverty level. And that fact, coupled with the 8-hour drive, is why this chamber is not full of Karuk tribal members right now. Today, California's salmon and steelhead populations are in steep decline. Numerous recent scientific studies and news reports tell us that many species are on the brink of extinction. And although we've had several good years of Chinook runs on the Klamath River, the trend over the last several decades has shown steep declines in both ESA-listed coho and Chinook salmon, which fuel the California sport fishing industry, as well as California's commercial fishing industry. For native tribes such as the Karuk, the loss of fish transcends, economics and fishing industries and sports fishing. The salmon are a cultural icon for the Karuk people. Their cultural identity is tied to the salmon. Their tribal ceremonies, their religion is based upon annual returns of salmon and steelhead and lamprey and sturgeon and other species. And many Karuk tribal members today still depend on the returns of salmon to put food on their families' tables. There are a lot of reasons, or a lot of factors that contribute to the decline of these fish populations, and tighter regulations on small-scale motorized gold mining will not by itself reverse these trends. But it is a factor we can control, and we can take action on it today, and it will make a difference. As highlighted by the persistent drought, water is our most precious natural resource, and we must ensure that what little we have left is clean and fit for fish to swim in, for humans to drink. Small-scale gold mining is almost exclusively a recreational activity popularized by mining clubs. And according to the 2012 legislative analysis for Assembly Bill 120, the fees associated with obtaining mining permits do not cover the cost of running the mining program. And this means that California taxpayers have been subsidizing a recreational activity that's contributed to declines of native fish and impairing water quality. This subsidy has been over $1.5 million taken from the California Fish and Game Preservation Fund and or the general fund, according to that analysis. So for these reasons and many others, the Karuk tribe is here today to urge you to support SB 637 so that we can continue the progress we've made in restoring our fisheries in the Klamath River and preserve the quality of water for all Californians. Thank you very much.
Your testimony. Other people wish to add their name and position of support.
Steve Evans, representing Friends of the River. We strongly support this bill.
Thank you very much, Steve. Yes.
Andrew Grinberg with Clean Water Action and support.
Olivia Regalio, Sierra Club California in support.
Sierra Club in support. Anyone else testifying here in support? Let us move to the opposition. Two primary witnesses, please, on the front table.
One witness will take our entire time.
Okay. Does everyone else know that? Yes. Okay, good. Just checking.
Good morning, Madam Chair. My name is Shannon Poe. I'm the president of American Mining Rights Association. I'm also a property owner, a gold claim owner, and a suction dredger in the state of California. I know I don't look like a typical miner. You can thank my wife for that. She cleaned me up pretty good.
Was that a professional dredger or recreational?
I'm a professional dredger.
Thank you.
There is no such thing as a recreational dredger.
Okay.
We don't throw the gold back into the river, so.
Like fish, yeah.
Yeah.
Got it.
Well, I want to thank you for the time this morning. We have miners all across California represented here, and some of them have driven many, many hours to be here. I know I just drove all the way from Boise to be here, the 9-hour drive. So I'd like to state that just a few short minutes doesn't really allow us to adequately present our side. And I know that a lot of the perception of the small miners is that we're wide-eyed, crazy country folk, and that's just not the case. Most of us are very responsible. We care as much about the water quality and the environment as anybody else, even the folks in support of this bill. Last year alone, just myself, I removed over 15 tons of garbage off of my own mining claims that was dumped by the regular public. I know that because I've actually had to pay for the disposal of that, and I did bring a picture of that. It filled up about 15 trucks. We've been suction dredging in California here since 1944 when Jacques Cousteau invented the aqualung. During the 50s, suction dredging was largely confined to just the major rivers and streams, and we didn't even get 10 years in before the legislator decided that dredging needed to be regulated. And they commissioned a study in 1959, which led to the first suction dredge regulations in 1961. The first section, which is 5653 of the Fish and Game Code. These early regulations set restrictions on salmon-bearing rivers, and I know these folks were talking about salmon here. I do want everybody to know here that about 80% or more of the gold claims in California, suction dredge claims, have no anadromous fish, no salmon, no steelhead. We operated under this set of regulations through DFG until a environmental impact report was prepared in '93, and the second set of dredging regulations was issued in 1994, which further restricted the seasons, closed many rivers throughout the state, and further restricted the maximum nozzle size which we could use. We fought for 6 years to reinstate our fundamental rights to again work on claims. And for nearly 70 years, we've worked without any litigation, and suddenly we find ourselves the subject of constant litigation and legislation. Yet it's important to note that the rivers today are no different today than they were when the suction dredge ban was employed, with one exception. Mercury levels are rising since the suction dredge moratorium. So I want to give you a little perspective. This is actually a suction dredge nozzle, and this attaches to a hose, and what a suction dredger does is it's a vacuum, and it vacuums up the gravels through there. The hose that's actually used on these suction dredges, most people don't know this, but the manufacturer of these hoses, they sell them to us, but also to the Department of Fish and Game. It's the same hose that they use to transport the fish from their stock trucks when they stock a lake or a river or a stream. It's the same hose. There's no turbines or anything inside of a suction dredge. It's all entirely open. I've been dredging since 1972. That kind of dates me. And I have never once yet sucked a fish up a nozzle. They're just too smart from that. Right now, you can see the size of my fist is about the size of a rock that this suction dredge will pull up. We brought a picture here of a dredge on the Klamath River that was taken from an aerial view, but you can't even see it. So we wanted to give you some perspective of just how insignificant a dredge is on a river the size of the Klamath. Right now, we can't even use a 2-inch dredge on our claims. And I brought you a show and tell here. This bottle of gold is worth about $5,000, and it's what I obtained in one day with a 4-inch suction dredge on one of my gold claims out of Yosemite. This amount of gold that's in here is worth about $50. That's the amount that I can average now by not being able to use a suction dredge. So the matter here really is about 637, and it revolves around mercury and the science that they have provided, and I want to address that, as well as this.
Are you going to be here on the 29th?
I don't know, ma'am.
The challenge is other than myself, there's no one on this committee that will be part of the environmental quality hearing that specifically addresses the mercury issue.
Correct. I think that it's important, though, Madam Secretary. So it's just you are the only one that is going to vote on this bill today. Is that correct?
No.
Okay.
The bill itself, but it's mostly on the fish and wildlife aspects associated with the impacts of suction dredge, not the mercury part of it, which will be in that water quality.
Right. I understand that. In order to address the good senator's comments here about, because this bill is...
Okay, you have a couple more minutes, so I won't interrupt you again if you wanted to use it on that. But I would encourage you to send whatever information you have in writing so we can make sure it's part of that record over there.
Okay. This bill disproportionately affects the poor, and especially the lower and also the middle class, and quite frankly, the elderly. Many of us, and I would question the statistics given earlier, really rely on the gold that they get in the summertime to carry them through the winter. As a matter of fact, I make my entire living off of mining for gold, and we just don't believe that the evidence is there to support 637. I just want to add a couple of facts here, is that According to the only survey conducted of suction dredgers on how much mercury they recover, it equates to over 26 tons of mercury that we've removed since we've been dredging. Now, when you do the math on that in 16 ounces per pound all the way up to 26 tons, under the Sierra Fund and their project that they're doing right now, which is roughly about $7,000 an ounce, that would be a $5.8 billion cost to remove the mercury using the Sierra Fund. Suction dredgers, and this is the statistics that we have provided everybody, remove 98% of the mercury, and that's an EPA study that's just a simple fact. Suction dredges remove 98% of the mercury. The cutter dredge that Sierra Fund uses removes 84% of the mercury. We generate revenue for the state through the permitting process that's already in existence through DFG. So you look at a $5.8 billion cost versus the aspect that it's going to be a revenue generated through the suction dredge permitting process. There's a study that was created by Dr. Michael Singer of the UC Santa Barbara, found in 2013 that mercury was moving from the high alpine areas down to the lower elevations. And the USGS survey shows that measured methyl mercury levels on the South Yuba River have significantly increased since the suction dredge ban. So just in the last 5 years, the mercury levels are going up because the suction dredgers can't get in there to remove the mercury. The simple fact, Madam Chair, is, and I won't go through this whole long process of all of these notes that I've created, is that suction dredges remove the mercury, they remove the lead. I have a picture here that I'd like to show you. This is a gentleman by the name of Alan Trees. He's a suction dredger. This is 1,250 pounds of fishing weights that he removed in 8 hours of suction dredging with a 6-inch dredge. That's in one day. I can't remember how much lead that I have. I think it's probably close to 300 pounds that I've removed, and that's in just one waterway that doesn't have any salmon up out of Yosemite. I have 11 pounds of mercury that I've collected. What we need to create is we can make this bill better. We can work with the opposition on this. You have enormous numbers of people that are out there suction dredging. If we could get a collection system set up where, you know what, you have your suction dredge miners come in and they turn in the mercury, they turn in the lead, they can generate revenue through the permitting process that already exists. You'll get your rivers and streams cleaned. One last thing that I want to add here is that in the 90s and prior to that, we used to get calls all the time from the Forest Service, and Gold Clubs did. And they would ask us after a giant fire to come in and dredge the rivers because that was what was causing the fish to return. So what we've created is fish habitat. All of this science is there. And we strongly urge you to vote in opposition to this based on the facts that we've provided.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And sorry I interrupted you in the middle. Anyone wishing to... just a second, let me get through that, and then we'll open it up for questions of the key witnesses. Anyone wishing to add their name and position of opposition, just for the record? There's no time. Opposition to the bill. Opposition to this bill. Or you can stand up and we can see that. And for our records, I'd see, 30 or 40 easily people that have come all this way, probably more than that. Thank you very much for coming. I see this is an important issue to all of you. Right. Now, open up for questions of the witnesses.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much for your presentation. You certainly educated me a lot. It seems as though we have to become subject matter experts pretty fast up here on the dais in order to make some intelligent decisions. And I was very impressed by your contention that you pull not just gold out of the ground in the bottom of the rivers, but you pull up other heavy metals, and I understand a little bit of what's going on here. Actually, I was a chemistry major while I was going through school before I became a pharmacist. So 26 tons of mercury removed. That's significant. When you recover lead or you recover mercury, what do you and your colleagues, how do you dispose of it?
Well, that's a good question. I can only speak for myself, and typically there are facilities that will accept that. Basically, what I do is I store it because I just haven't sold it. I haven't taken it anywhere. I have a mill site, and I actually have a safe storage for it. But that identifies specifically why we need a collection facility or a system in place that people can take this. And I think that if we made, pay them $10 an ounce or $20 an ounce, I think the state would find that it would generate revenue, and it would give them an incentive to actually go out and continue to clean the rivers and streams.
And what do you suspect is the number of people that are engaged in this practice in the state? How many jobs are we talking about here?
Well, it's a tough thing to say. I know that there was about 4,000 dredge permits in 2009, which was the last year that we could suction dredge. But you have to look at the economic impacts, especially of the rural communities. I know where I have a home up in Coulterville, California. It's a pretty small community. Has been devastated. Groveland, Sonora, Mariposa, I can speak to that area. And it's in the tens of millions of dollars because California is so rich with gold. 80% of the gold's still in the ground. So you have people coming from all over the country, actually all over the world, come to California to dredge when they could. And so that generates a lot of income for these small communities, and it has devastated them. We can give you an example after example of businesses that have actually closed since the suction dredge moratorium. Hardware stores, gas stations, cafes, restaurants, tourism, all those businesses have been severely impacted.
And then you mentioned, finally, one last question. You mentioned that since the moratorium in a certain area, you said that there was a dramatic increase in mercury levels. Who did that study, and do you have a copy of that study for us? That
was on the South Yuba River, and yes, it is provided in your in the book that we handed out too.
Jeff, this.
It's in there, okay.
You have a copy over there.
I'm sorry we got this so late. I would like to have seen this before, but I appreciate that you submitted it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Other questions by members? If not, I will excuse the witnesses over here.
Well, I think
if you wanted to ask a question of your witness.
Well, I know you had some comments on collection that you might want to address. Yeah.
If you'll let me address the comments on the collection process, because
through the chair, yes. It's just not the normal practice of bringing up the witnesses a second time unless there's a question from all of us.
Oh, I get, okay. The thought was that there were some things mentioned by the witness.
That would be your rebuttal, yes. So, if you want.
Yeah, just the comments on the collection.
Okay, I just wanted to comment on collection. When I was on the Nevada County Board of Supervisors, we did understand that there was a problem with where to take mercury for collection at that time under Prop 65. As you know, mercury is a Prop 65 toxic material. You're not allowed to carry it around with you. So Nevada County worked with the State Water Resources Control Board to get a specialized permit to allow us to collect mercury. I stood out in the parking lot, and we collected a lot of mercury. We also had a number of suction dredge miners approach us that day and ask us to purchase the mercury. 56% of the guys do collect mercury, and many of them carry it around in mayonnaise jars and pickle jars, and it's anything more than 12 pounds of it, you're supposed to take it to a safe refuge. Those exist. In Nevada County recently, we had a suction dredge miner bring us some mercury to show us this about how they're removing it. And of course, I'm going to just address the flaws in that science at the next hearing. But we actually worked with that guy. We helped him pack it appropriately because he walked in with a bottle full of mercury. We have a HAZWAPER license in our organization. We wrapped it properly and followed him to the hazardous waste disposal site in Nevada County. It's already possible to dispose of this stuff, but what we found is suction dredge miners still use it commonly as part of their recovery as a gold mining process, another part of their activity that we find unregulated.
No, guys, inappropriate.
So that's my response to Mr. Allen's question.
Thank you. And I will excuse the witnesses. Thank you very much for your testimony. And we'll open it up to the... this bill's been moved by Senator Woke. Any questions of the author before I allow him to close? Questions of the author? All right. Senator Allen, you've heard differences of opinion here. This bill probably is going to take some work, as you know.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, I'm happy to meet with the gentleman and talk to him about some of his concerns. I guess, this is not a ban on suction dredge mining. This is a bill that seeks to empower the Water Board to exercise its responsibility and authority under our clean water regulations to regulate this activity so as to protect the quality of water in our state. So, the sorts of issues that were raised involving the removal of mercury, removal of lead, the environmental impacts of the mining would be examined by the Water Board that does this work looking at all of our rivers, and they would then be able to make determinations. It's not a ban. It simply, this bill seeks to address the core concerns raised by the court in the recent San Bernardino case by clarifying the role of the Water Board in regulating this type of activity. So with that in mind, I'm so happy to work with both the gentleman and folks from this committee and others, and respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you very much for your close. And I do note for the record members on page 2 of the analysis, there's a brief mention of the 2 court cases, which is probably the rationale for why we're addressing this bill here today. And there's been a motion by Senator Woke, and that would be do pass as amended to environmental quality, because it has been double referred, where we're going to spend a longer time talking about the mercury and lead and contaminants and the Water Board's role in all this, which is probably the primary concern and the reason people are here, right? Yep.
Senators Pavley?
Aye.
Pavley, aye. Stone? No. Stone, no. Allen?
Aye.
Allen, aye. Fuller? Hertzberg? Hueso? Jackson? Monning? Wolk? Wolk, aye. That has 3.
Let's get these out. I don't want mercury here.
Madam Chair, maybe as a courtesy to the folks who are here, we want to explain to them that the vote hasn't been completed?
Senator Allen has asked me to, because so many of you have driven a long distance, anything you would like to submit in writing before the hearing on April 29th will be official part of the record and read by the people analyzed for that hearing, because the information regarding mercury and lead is relevant to that jurisdiction. And I appreciate your attendance, and Senator Allen has agreed to continue to work with the gentleman who represented you all today. Thank you for coming all the way to Sacramento. Okay.
Stone chair, or do you want me to chair? Do you want a chair?
Okay, thank you. Look, I wish I had it before, but I said I wish we had the information before, but yeah.